Welcome to our first lesson together. In this lesson, we'll start by exploring the fundamentals. How to create and manipulate strokes, how to customize their appearances, and how to animate it to bring it all to life. We'll begin by setting up the composition and creating a main stroke that will serve as the base for everything else we'll create in this session. From there, we'll take a look at some core features like dashes, taper, and wave, as well as some handy tools like repeater and simple expressions. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a great foundation that will prepare you to create more advanced animations in the lessons to come. So let's dive in. So first thing we'll do is to create a new composition. And for this entire course, we're going to create a ratio that's 1920 by 1080 pixels. And we're going to keep the frame rate to 24 frames per second. And for this one, let's change the duration to 20 seconds. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is to create a main stroke. And this stroke will be kind of like an anchor for the entire animation. So by the end, you'll be able to control how it looks simply by going back and changing this one stroke. We're going to turn on the proportional grid right here, so we can see exactly where the center of the screen is. So I'm just going to zoom in like this. And now we're ready to draw the stroke. So let's pick pen tool and place the first keyframe right in the center. Great. And I'm going to zoom out, go down to this corner and place the second. Perfect. So let me just zoom back out. And we can just switch off the proportional grid. So now let's add some curve to the stroke. And to do that, I'm going to pick the convert vertex tool and pull on this end like this. All right, that looks nice. So let's remove the fill. And we're going to change the stroke width to, let's say, 200. Let's also rename this layer to main stroke. Okay, so now we got our first stroke. And now let's go in and explore what kind of features are hidden inside this layer. All right, so let's open up main stroke, go to contents, shape 1, and stroke 1. And now you can see all the stroke settings we'll need. Let's start with changing the line cap to round. And now let's focus on these three down here: dashes, taper, and wave. Let's start with wave. And if I open it up, you'll see some different parameters. You have amount, wavelength, and phase. And the first one, amount, is currently at 0%. But if I increase this, you'll see now we got some wave to our stroke. So let's set this to 90%. Now, if we go down to wavelength and increase it, we can change our wave so it broadens out like this. So let's set this one to 250. Great, but if I play this back, nothing happens. And that's because we still need to change the phase of the wave. And if I change this number, you can see straight away that this is how we can make the wave change position. And what we're interested in doing is to try to make it move outward from the center, which is what happens when I move it in the negative direction like this. But instead of creating keyframes, we're going to add a simple expression to make this move infinitely. To do that, I'll go down to this little time icon right here, and I'll press down Alt or Option key while clicking it. And now this text field has appeared where we can add our expression. So let's remove this and we'll write time asterisk -100. Now, if I play it back, we got some motion. Perfect. And because we added the minus in front of 100, it's moving in the negative direction, which is what we wanted. But right now we still got these blobs at the beginning of stroke. So to fix that, we're going to use taper. So let's go down here, find taper, and increase the start length all the way to 100%. Much better, but it's still a bit thin here in the beginning. So to fix this, let's go down to start width and increase it to 25%. All right, so we're almost done with our first stroke. The last little thing we're going to do is to add a repeater. If we go back to our settings, you'll see this little add button over here. And if we press it, there are all these cool features we can add to our shape. But for now, we're only going to focus on this one, repeater. So if I press it, you can see that instantly we get something interesting going on. Now the stroke has repeated itself 3 times and is currently overlapping a bit to the right over here. But we can change that by going down here to this new repeater menu. Now we can see 2 options: copies, which determines how many times the shape repeats itself, and offset, which lets us choose where we want the copies to appear in relation to the original path. So for example, if I change the copies to 20 and the offset is at 0, well, that means that now 20 copies will appear on the right side of the original path we drew. Now, if I change the offset to -20, well, then the opposite thing is happening, and now they all appear to the left side. So to have them appear equally on both sides of our original path, we'll have to change it to -10. But for now, let's change it back to 3 copies and 0 offset. And instead, we'll go down to transform repeater. Now here we can do a lot more. So let's start out by trying rotation. So if I pull this number here, you can see how our copies are now rotating from quite a bit off the center. And that's because the position property is currently set to 100. So everything is being offset 100 pixels to the right of the center. So let's change this to 0. And now our copies are rotating from the center. Now we can go back and add more copies. So I'll change it to 10. But to make sure the copies are spread out equally around the center, let's make a little change to our rotation. So to get this right, we'll have to do some quick math. A complete trip around a circle is 360 degrees. So let's write 360 divided by our 10 copies, and that's 36. Perfect, so now they are all spread equally. So now we are ready for our second stroke, and this time we're going to focus on dashes. First, let's hide these settings. We don't need that right now. And then let's duplicate the layer by pressing Command or Option D. And here it's important to check that the anchor point is placed right at the center. To move the anchor point, simply hit Y on the keyboard and then you can move it around. And for this one, we're going to play around with dashes. So let's rename this one to Dashy Stroke. And let's also change the label color. Perfect. Now let's just change the rotation a little bit so they don't overlap. I'm going to set it to 12. Now let's go up and change the color of the stroke. And this time let's go with a red one. So to change this stroke from a wavy one to one with dashes, we're going to have to go back to the stroke settings. But finding these hidden settings all the time can be a bit tedious. So what I usually do is select the layer and then use the search bar. So here, for instance, I'll type stroke and we can see stroke 1 appear here. And now we are back to our dashes, taper, and wave. Great, so next I'm going to hide the wave settings. We don't need that. And let's instead add some dashes by hitting this plus button. So now we have the dash and the offset option. So let's increase dash to 50. And right now we can't really see the space between the dashes. So let's hit the plus icon again. And now we get a gap option. So let's increase this to 150. Perfect. Let's also change the stroke width to about 35 to make it a bit thinner. But when I play this back, it doesn't move, just like the wave didn't before. So what we'll have to do is add another time expression. And this time we're going to add it to the offset property. I'll hit the stopwatch down here and write time asterisk -100. But now we can see the stroke appears to move much slower than the previous one. So let's go back and change the expression to -300 instead. And now the speed matches. Perfect. All right, and one last thing we're gonna do before we move on to the next stroke is to make sure that the path is following the original stroke. To do that, we're gonna locate the path property inside of our shape. So let's go back to shape 1 and then we have the path option right here. Now we have to do the same thing for the other stroke layer, but there's a much quicker way to do this, and that is to select both of the layers, go back to the search menu, and search for path. Now we got both path properties visible and none of the other things we don't need right now. So let's parent the path of the dashy stroke to the main stroke by pulling this pick whip icon and dragging it down here. So now if I change the path of this main stroke, let's try to change the curve a bit. You can see that the second stroke follows along. Perfect. So let's create our third stroke. And this time let's try to combine the wave property and the dash property to get a cool looking result. Okay, so let's duplicate the dashy stroke and rename it to bubbly stroke this time. And let's also change the label color. And again, let's also rotate it just a little bit. So let's make it 24 for this one. Perfect. Now let's change the stroke width to, let's say 100. And also change the color to a purple one. Now let's begin with dashes. I'm gonna select the layer and search for dash. Perfect. And now we can open up the settings. And what we're trying to achieve here is to get some bubbly circle shapes instead of these elongated dashes. So to do that, we're going to change dash to 1. Now, because the width of the dashes is at a minimum, but the caps are still round, that leaves us with these perfectly round circles. And if I play it back now, you can see that everything else is still moving because we duplicated the stroke from before. Let's also change the gap so we can get the bubbles much closer to each other. So I'm going to change this one to 40. Okay, so now let's try to add some waves on top. I'll select the layer, search for wave, and now I can open up the settings right here. And because we duplicated the stroke from before, our settings are still the same. All we have to do is press on hide over here, and we got our waves back. Perfect. All right, we got our strokes. So let's add some background and some nice effects to make this animation really stand out. First, I'm gonna add a new solid. So I'm gonna go up here, select new, solid. And let's call this one background. Next, I'm gonna place it at the very bottom of the timeline. Now, this looks good, but we can spice it up by adding some gradient. To do that, let's go to Effects and search for Gradient and pick Gradient Ramp. And we want this gradient to start at the center. So let's change the ramp shape to radial. And we're also going to change the height of the ramp to 540. So it's exactly in the middle of the comp. Now let's change the colors to something a little more interesting. So I'm going to go up to Start Color and pick a bright orange. Let's just make it a little bit desaturated. Perfect. And I'm also going to change the end color to a dark purple like this. Great. And finally, I'm also just going to go back to main stroke and change the color to black. Perfect. Now you should try to experiment with different colors and gradients to get the look that you want. All right, so let's also add a gradient to our dashy stroke. So I'm going to pick the layer, go up to stroke, press this one, and choose radial gradient. Perfect. Now we can go inside the colors. And for the one side, I'm going to pick a bright orange like this. And for the other, I'm going to pick a red. But right now it's kind of hard to see where the gradient is. And that's because we have to adjust these small handles hidden in here. So I'm going to drag this one out all the way to the edge. Now, another thing we can do is add layer styles. So let's select the bubbly stroke and go to Layer, Layer Styles, and let's try out Inner Glow. And now we can go down here and change the settings. And let's pick a bright orange for this one. Now we just have to increase the size a bit. So let's put it up to 25. That looks good. And let's see what we got. Perfect. Now, if I go back to main stroke and I change the curve once again, let's see what happens. And now everything follows exactly what the main stroke is doing. All right, so only thing missing now is a title. Now, you can type whatever you want, but let's write something encouraging. So I'll start typing. And I'm just gonna make sure the layer is centered like this. And there we go. Perfect. So that's it for the first lesson. Now you're officially a master of dashes, taper, and wave, the 3 essential stroke features that will form the foundation for the entire course. But this is just the beginning. In the next lessons, we'll take these techniques even further, building more complex and dynamic animations step by step. So take a moment to play around with what you just learned, adjust the path, tweak the settings to get the kind of cool results you're looking for. And when you're ready, I'll see you in the next lesson. Well, we'll keep building on these skills to create even more cool and complex animations. So, great work, and I'll see you soon.